good morning from Vietnam. Good afternoon to you, Christine. Thanks a lot for spending your late afternoon to join our program to share your amazing journeys to our audience. And on behalf of the listeners around the world, I want to say thank you.
It's my pleasure, to be here. I'm so excited to join you and to have this conversation.
Yeah, and now you have a new family, you have a new friend in Vietnam. So if you decided to come to this country, make sure you let me and Vivian know. We would love to take you and your family around, show you our beautiful, our culture, the food, and cities, and it will be our great honor to do that, Christine.
I will be absolutely doing that, and we have it on recording, so I know you've said it, so I will definitely follow up on that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And for a little taste of our culture, Christine is very honored if we and our audience can have you share a little bit about who you are and the work that you've been doing. Would you please do that for our audience?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I'm kind of operating at an intersection of my career path, which is as an organization design consultant, which I've always done inside of companies. So I'm a systems thinker, and I take into account all parts of an organization when I work with leaders and teams. That's been my professional path. But I've also recently gone through the process of a doctoral program and a dissertation that was, for me, a beautiful opportunity to study a problem that I was noticing after 3 decades in the workforce. And I can talk a little bit more about that, but that's what led me to write my book. But the intersection of my professional life, but also my research. So I got to be a scholar. I got to be learning academic rigor so that I could study this problem. I'm also an executive coach, so I've worked one-on-one a lot with leaders who are grappling with issues around how they lead and how effective they are. And so I've been doing this work in companies in the United States and have been mostly in the STEM world of science, technology, engineering, and math, but have worked with large and small companies. And so I've had a lifetime of experience with being inside companies, doing this work with leaders inside the system, but also seeing the system itself and how it operates. And it's endlessly fascinating.
Well, and this conversation is an opportunity for us to understand more about the journey leading to what you do, and let's travel time together. How does that sound to you, Christine?
That sounds great. I'm ready.
Alrighty. So earlier in this conversation, when we talk about if you travel to our country, I would love to take you to my hometown. It's called Da Nang. So I grew up there. It's a very poor city, small city, devastated by the wars here. And I grew up in a very poor family. One night we had electricity. The next night we did not. So it's dark, and my first dream about the work that I would love to do when I'm growing up is to become an astronaut, so I can see, everything is beautiful and shining on the moon. But life has taken me to a very different direction. So, Christine, when you were little, what was your dream about the future works that you are going to do? Would you share with us?
I always knew I wanted to be able to explain things to people because I love learning. When I was a child in first grade, I already knew how to read and write because I had time. My older sister was at school. My mother was trying to keep me busy. And so from an early age, I knew I wanted to explain what I was learning. I was so fascinated by books and by the subjects at school that I couldn't wait to share that knowledge. So I was one of those annoying people in a classroom that always has their hand up saying, I know the answer, can I share? And it's not that far of a stretch these days in terms of what I'm trying to do is mirror back to leaders and teams within an organization what I see going on for them inside of a system. So it's really helping people be self-aware so that they can make choices about what they might need to change.
Wow. Christine, a little, you could dream of anything, like be Barbie, could be anything. So why you had the interest of explaining things through your lens, through your understanding of, like that particular knowledge to other people?
Yeah, great question, huh? I think it really is because I loved the possibilities of the
Mm.
world. When I started reading books, I could, like always, of course, stories for kids and then young adults, I could go into all kinds of different worlds and I could inhabit different people's lives. And I could always see the possibilities, which is probably one of the reasons why I really like change, is
Mm.
because I'm fascinated by how things could be, as opposed to how are they now. Or a lot of people are good at pointing out what's wrong with a change, why the change wouldn't be good, but I'm almost the opposite of figuring out how could we do this better or different. And so I also wanted to be a world-class equestrian. I wanted to have my own horse and ride horses and go into competitions, but that dream ended pretty quick because my parents were pretty firm with me. They were not going to buy me a horse. And so I had to kind of, okay, now what? Well, I love learning and I love seeing the world and I love adventures and possibilities.
Wow. So if you trace that curiosity and the growth mindset, the ability to think, with all possibilities and opportunities, where is that coming from inside of you? Is it coming from your family, the genetics, or is it coming from the upbringings, the journey that you discovering it yourself?
Well, you know what? My parents, of course, we all learn messages from our parents, whether we want to or not, when we're young. And my parents, from a very early age, said to me, I don't know that they said the same thing to my other siblings, but I'm the one that remembers. They said to me to take the initiative. You have to take the initiative in life. Don't wait for other people to do things for you.
Mm,
And that's the way you can strive for and achieve your own goals.
mm,
And I took that to heart. I thought that was how I should live my life, even as a kid. So I was always volunteering for things at school or trying out things, or even doing something like improvisation, like improv classes. Like those can be kind of scary, but I was always like, well, why not? And what's the worst that could happen is I make a fool out of myself, but so is everybody else doing the same thing. So honestly, I took that message and internalized it as I'm talking about being probably 6, 7, 8 years old.
wow. And how did you keep that? How could you keep that curiosity constantly expanding over the years, but not like shrinking?
I kept wondering things. I annoyed my father a lot because I always wanted to know why.
Uh-huh.
Why is this like that? Why is it the way it is? Why couldn't it be something different? And as my parents sometimes do, I think at one point he said, because I said so, and that was supposed to be a good enough explanation. And honestly, I really think it helped me when I had to do my research in my doctoral program because you really have to ask a lot of questions and you really have to be I had to be looking into new ways of thinking about things. So I'm the person who'll say, if other people say, uh, why isn't it this way? I'll say why not? Try it. So that's my question is why, and it can be a little bit overwhelming at times because if I'm always trying new things, I have a hard time with filtering sometimes about what choices I make, and I can
Uh,
I can overcommit, and
wow.
because everything looks so interesting, and so I have to watch that I don't take on so many things that I'm not doing any of them very well. But
Yeah.
that's the overuse of taking the initiative. Now I have to be a little bit more differentiating and make choices.
Make choices. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. So by the time that that little girl growing up and starting to define the path that she's gonna be going to in the future. So back then, with that curiosity in mind, you could join into the world of medicine, enjoy the chemistry, in the world of technology, in the world of marketing and sales and anything.
Mm-hmm.
Why organizational and change?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, so a long time ago, in when I was in high school, I would say we didn't have a very robust guidance
Mhm.
counselor support system. So I didn't have any adult saying to me, you could do this, you could do that, you could do this. So I kept continuing to take certain kinds of classes that were more generalist, which is okay because I'm so interested in so many things. One thing led to another, and to speed through the early stages of my career, a friend of mine suggested at one point that I apply for a human resources position within the company that we both worked at. And I said, "Oh, why would you say that?" And he said, "Because you're really good with people." And he meant like you talk a lot and you're really curious. So I did apply, I did get that job, and I had other jobs in the field of human resources, but I got into trouble.
Oh,
And I got into trouble because back when I was starting out in my career, the role of a human resources person was very often to apply and uphold policies that the company had.
personnel.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I was questioning policies. I was like, that's a stupid policy. Why do we have that? And so I got warned a bit that I really shouldn't be saying that out loud because I'm the human resources person. And I got a little worried, like, well, I don't know that this is the right career for me. So I was searching around for educational opportunities at the master's level. And I eventually found this field of organization development.
Wow.
And what I realized was, oh, they're speaking my language, because it really is about long-term, big picture, system-wide, values-driven change. Because you have to develop an organization, not a particular person one at a time.
Hmm.
And so should I, would I, could I have gone into chemistry, or even I really wanted to go into into kinesiology because I'm very active, but I didn't have enough science credits. I would have had to go and do a lot of remedial work. So I was like, okay, not that. But when I found the field of organization development, I felt like I had found my spot, because it was
Home run.
still working with people, and now I could work in a system
Ah,
and I could see how things relate. And one of my superpowers turns out to be the ability to take disparate ideas and concepts that people are talking about and connect them. And I'm saying that because people have told me that over the years. Like, oh, you're really good at making that connection, and where they hadn't seen it. And I never thought that was special, because it
ah,
was just how I thought of seeing the world in a certain way, of relationship and connectivity. So that's a long answer to your question, but I kind of accidentally found organization development because I was failing in human resources. I'm not, I'm not saying that it's not a great field. I know lots of wonderful people, and you know, it's a very important role. And these days, my colleagues in human resources roles tend to be in more strategic and more systems thinking kinds of roles and mindsets. So I don't
mhm.
want to give an impression that it's like, oh, not a great role. It is. But when I found what really mattered to me, and then I was able to find work in companies that had those positions, because they're not very common. Usually it's an outside consultant coming in.
Ah,
Uh, in fact, I had the pleasure of going to a workshop when I was very early in my career as an org development person with Edgar Schein, who is a
ah,
guru in the field of organization culture. This was 30 years ago, and
yeah.
it just was transformative, the way he talked about what he did and how he worked. And so it was a privilege to be there with him.
Wow, wow. And I'll bring you to the moment that you had that eureka moment, like epiphany, where you found your home run, and to a lot of people, that feel of change, organization system is complex, it's hierarchical, it's a lot of, stakeholders in there. Change is not going to be, overnight. The bigger the organization, the bigger the boat, for you to push. So it's scary, and and a lot of pushback from all angles, for change. So, why is it that intrigue you for that and motivate you to get into that hard work, though?
Well, again, I fall back on my innate curiosity and
Mm,
my relentless belief in the possibilities of what could be. And I will tell you, I'm sure that's what's gotten me through some of the more frustrating times
mm,
of that pushback that you talked about, or the um, the resistance. And I've learned that, look, change is not an event. And maybe it used to be when companies would go through a planned movement from one way of working to another. And I think it was more like that maybe 30 years ago, 25, 20 years ago. But it's no longer an event. It's actually in the environment. It's inextricable. You can't pull it apart from the atmosphere, from the daily rhythm of the company. So it's with us all the time, and I think of it as an ongoing journey. And so if it's going to take a while, I know that in advance, and I'm not trying to do it in a hurry. In fact, I can point out the downside of doing that, trying to do a change in a hurry. That's where I do my best work, is to help leaders understand that that change takes time, that there's staggered transitions for people. Often a
mm,
leader is the one way out in front because they've gone through if you think about Bill Bridges' work around endings and neutral zone and beginnings, the leaders have gone through that themselves because they were the ones that had to start the change and make the change in the first place and design it and get it approved. So they're all the way through to the new beginnings, and they're talking about it as if everybody else sees the same thing they do. It's going to be great. It's going to be wonderful. Can't wait for the future. But what they don't realize is that employees who are just hearing about it for the first time are scared to death because they don't know what's happening and they don't know what it means to them. So when I can insert myself into that process and help a leader see that you've got to meet people where they are, you've got to go with them. You can't manage change. That may sound very provocative on a public, broadcast, but I don't think you can manage change. You can manage your own reaction to a change. But if you're a leader, all you can try to do is help lead people through the change, through the way you interact with them, and through the understanding of whatever stage they're at. It could be resistance, it could be denial, it could be uh, experimenting, it could be commitment. There's a whole curve that people go through. And that goes back to me wanting to help leaders become more self-aware. Where are they with the change? And then how do they make sure that they understand that that might be different than how somebody that's behind them, or, not as far into the change as they are.
mm. And Christine, I when I look at organization, and when we hiring some people, right, there's a lot of hiring process to qualify employees, for them in terms of the like a professional and behavior and everything, a lot of like metrics to measure a person, right? And when hiring, but then organizations still feeling there's a lot of like push for these people to to change, and to change faster, to adopt change. And why is that amazing people still having huge resistance to change?
Oh, well, that's a whole conversation in of itself. And I don't pretend to be an expert on that, but I've read enough and practiced enough, is that people aren't necessarily resisting the change. They just don't necessarily understand it yet. They don't
Ah,
understand what it means for them. and they don't necessarily see the goodness or the positivity the way somebody else does. And so when we start to push change, because we as in the collective leadership have decided that it needs to change for whatever reason, either they wanted the change or they had to make a change, it comes down to not spending the time or the effort to really communicate enough or to understand where people at and what does that person need to get through the change. When you're in that ending stage of, if I just use that as an example of the three of the different models, but just the Bill Bridges transitions. Somebody who's in the ending, they're grieving about something. They're experiencing a sense of loss. And they're not going to listen to a lot of inspiring messages because they're still processing what they're losing.
Mm.
And so if a leader ignores that, then the person isn't going to be ready to accept the change. When they're in the gray zone, there's some uncertainty, maybe a bit of curiosity, still maybe a little bit of fear, which is a very different feeling than grief. And then when they're coming out the other side to the new beginnings, now they're starting to look forward to or have willingness to understand what might be possible. So why do people keep resisting change? Is because I don't think we're presenting it in a way that they can grab onto very effectively. What do? We send an email. We have a town hall meeting. We record a video about it. It's very one way. When did we spend time listening to what is on somebody's mind or how they're processing the change so that we could help them? That's my in the trenches kind of observing of where changes typically get the most resistance. It's because we did not communicate effectively. We didn't tell the story, or we didn't tell the right story, or we didn't tell the story that they wanted to hear.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about pleasing everybody, making sure people feel happy, because I think that's a dangerous path to go down as well.
Mm.
But I want to know that person feels like it was clear, that they understood it, that they could see the rationale, like the why. Tell me what, tell me why, tell me how, so I have some information. Simon Sinek has the golden rule of people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And that's what we forget so much. We don't go into the why. Either we don't think that we need to, or we don't know what to say, or we just don't realize how important it is.
Christine, as a girl, as a person with curiosity and with a lot of why question, with a lot of, like thinking outside the box like you, right? And being in the industry, you work with leaders who always on the constant demand of changing and improving and making more efficient. And you also knowing the back end of the employees where they they worry about the change and everything. So how has that 3 decades of work between different, like zone in organization like that has changed you as the individual?
Thanks you for the question. I think it's made me realize the ever like critical importance of, for example, bringing people together to talk about or work on it. Right now, I'm working with a group of leaders in my organization that are the top leaders of this particular organization, but we're having a working group with the next layer of leaders under them. So they're jointly working on some changes that we're going to make. So they're talking together, and this is a representational group. It's not all of them. And I just no longer will tolerate things being done in a back room and being brought forward to say, here it is. The other thing I realized is the value of iteration. So we assume, and that comes from Agile, that comes from the world of Agile engineering. And I love it. I loved it. The minute I learned about it years ago was we don't have to figure this out perfectly in the first go. But what we really need to do is get 80%, minimal viable product, 80% the way we want it, but we need to check in with the client, whoever the client is, or stakeholder. In some cases, it's the employees. In some cases, it's a peer group. In some cases, it's an outside customer. And so I've gotten better at cutting to the chase about what it comes down to being, pulling people together, getting work done, and knowing that we're going to iterate. Some people have a hard time with that. Some people want all the details up front. They want everything to be super clear right away. And I'm not saying that's bad or wrong. I'm just saying it can be difficult when you're trying to make change and develop a plan together to make it work. But when people are part of the work, they're going to be more part of the solution. That's the other thing. People will buy into something. That's another thing about change and resistance. If people feel they had no say in it,
Yeah.
they're going to likely be resistant or very suspicious. Again, this particular change in some working processes that my company now is working on, by having representation from both the two, we're a pretty flat organization, so it's 2 layers of leadership. I guarantee you that second layer will be far more accepting of what is coming. It's not drastic change, but they'll be far more accepting because they know that they're colleagues. And by the way, their colleagues have to sell the ideas that they've been working on with the senior leaders to their peers, rather than me come and give a big presentation.
So I want to talk about your book now. Okay, Kristen, congratulations for doing that, and I know it's really hard work that you have spent time on doing. So the question is, since when you have the idea of putting your understanding, your experience, your stories onto writing a book?
Great question. So again, going back to my 3 decades in large and small companies, in mostly STEM, publishing and retail as well, I saw the same problem over and over and over. And the problem is the underrepresentation of women and minorities in leadership roles. And these percentages of those groups were not reflecting of the overall population of communities. And I didn't know why, because I saw all the effort that was going into attracting, recruiting, hiring diverse populations. I mean, the US spends billions of dollars. I'm only talking about the United States because that's, I'm not pretending to know how it is everywhere. So I didn't think it was an issue of diversity. Like, people were coming in, like literally coming in the front door, but they weren't staying. So the numbers of these percentages of representation had gotten better in the 10 years, that was the 10 years at the time, since companies started reporting on their diversity. And so I'm like, okay, there's some kind of a gap here. So I wanted to research that. And that's what got me into my doctoral program. I wanted the rigor. I wanted to learn how to do real research at a level that was maybe going to contribute back into the professional practice of organizational design, development, and change. So I realized in my preparing for, it's a 3-year program, they get you working on your dissertation pretty quickly, but I realized that I needed to do some work around inclusion. Because when you think about it, people say diversity and inclusion as if it's all one word. But it's really not. And I wanted to know what's the gap between where we are with these percentages of leaders being so low in women and minorities and where we should be. And so I did a gap analysis type of research, and I had 3 lenses that I used. One was, is it an issue about knowledge? Another one was, is it about motivation for leaders or for people that are in positions to hire and develop? Or is it a lens of organizational support? So knowledge, motivation, or support. And what I found was absolutely fascinating. It blew my mind. I found things like leaders were not making distinctions between diversity and inclusion. So they didn't
Oh,
have the
they put them
knowledge.
together.
They put them together. They did not
Wow.
make distinctions. I also saw, I had another question in my survey that I did, interviews. Another thing they didn't do was they didn't realize the question was something like, when was a time you noticed you had to do something different in your approach and you made the change around inclusion? And most of them did not have a specific moment. It was maybe over a period of years of work as a leader. So they didn't see that they weren't self-aware to make a
Mm.
change. They also didn't think of themselves as role models. There's an element of motivation that's called self-efficacy. So that if you believe you can do something, you're more likely to do it even if you fail. And they were not seeing themselves as role models because that was another
Ah.
question. And finally, the organizations around them were not providing support in terms of teaching them about inclusion. They weren't The organizations weren't asking them to set goals for performance like they do for other things like sales or product development or customer service. They weren't incentivizing leaders to have those kinds of things be in their daily practice, and they weren't holding them accountable.
Mm.
So without the knowledge, without the motivation, without the organizational support, no wonder they
Yeah.
weren't providing and creating and deepening experience of inclusion in the workplace. And by the way, the definition I'm using comes from research I did, and it has two parts to it. And I know there's no universal definition, so people listening may have a different one, and that's perfectly fine. I'm just saying here's what I found was most powerful, is that if a leader's truly inclusive, they see the value of
Mm.
somebody's unique contribution, but they also make sure that person knows it. So that's one part. The other part of the equation is that the leader is making sure that that individual knows that their talent is valued in a group.
Mm.
So you're not just off by yourself doing something in isolation. You're actually contributing to something as part of a group, and
The
you're
supporting
one of a
system.
group. Yeah. And
Mm.
so all of that being said, I loved my research. It was fascinating to me. I wrote my dissertation and I graduated. But let's face it, how many people really read a dissertation except your dissertation committee?
I know.
Nobody.
Nobody. Yeah.
Nobody. And so I thought, oh shoot, I'm going to have to write a book because I really think I really think there's something here. And I think that inclusion is an underused, under um, appreciated
Yeah.
leadership strategy for performance. Because if I truly, as an employee, and I can speak as an employee, if I truly feel that you see my contribution and you value it, and I'm part of a valued group, I'm going to go through brick walls for you, or for the, to do what I do best.
Mm.
And otherwise, if I feel like I have to wear a mask at work because I don't want to really reveal myself to you because I could get hurt or I might be invisible or whatever all the reasons are that people do not feel included,
Mm.
at best you'll get compliance.
Yeah.
And that's going to take you a long way. But I believe firmly that inclusion is a leadership and business strategy. So I brought my research. I brought some great stories from my interviews. I brought some of my own stories that I told on myself about how I wasn't inclusive for a long time. I just had blinders on. But I also made it practical. At the end of every chapter, three key points, three questions you could ask yourself, and three things you could do tomorrow. And
Wow.
and that was what my intention. And I tell you what, I, it is such a connection for people because everyone has a story about being included or not being included. And unfortunately, there's a few more stories about not being included. And that's where they want to lean in and have a connection. And the last thing I'll say about my answer to your question is that my editor asked me near the end, okay, what's your call to action? And I said,
Mm.
oh, that's such a cliche phrase. Do I really have to have a call to action? And she said, okay, what do you want people to do after they read your book? I'm like, oh, what I want them to do is try something. And then
Yeah.
I want them to let me know. And then I thought, well, how are they going to let me know? They have to then come and find me on LinkedIn. So the bigger game, the real passion for me is that I created inclusionable.com, which
Oh,
is for me a global online community of people who are curious about, there's that word again, and committed to deepening the experience of inclusion in the workplace. And
wow.
so the book is like an entry, like a handshake, a connection, and nobody leans in like that when I talk about organization development, but
Mm.
but they do when I talk about inclusion. And so that's what I'm appreciating is the connections that I've already made and the growth that I think is possible here from this. And I made up the word inclusionable
It's
because
beautiful.
you like
Yeah.
that? Thank you.
Yeah, I love
I
it. I love it. Yeah.
it came to me as representational of if you're a leader, I firmly believe you are accountable
Yeah.
for inclusion, but you're also able. You can do this. You do not have to get a special training. You do not have to go to school. You do not have to work for years and years. It's a daily practice, just like eating nutritious food or getting enough sleep or meditating or mindfulness. It's a practice. Whereas like to me, inclusion is a practice. It's a daily mindfulness.
Mm.
Diversity is a measurement of a number, and there's a lot that goes into it. And we need diversity, but diversity alone is insufficient.
Christine, if you look at all the leaders, I'm not talking about all, I'm talking majority of leaders that on their way up in the corporate ladders, right? There have been, their bosses, their mentor, their coaches that basically including them to being responsible to do that or being able to do that, so that lifting them to the next level of their career, right? So it's feel like it's so beautiful for them to do the same things for other people. And maybe because of they're too busy, maybe like you said earlier, that they misunderstanding the knowledge, the motivation,
Mm-hmm.
or the system is not that yet they have the ability, they are able to do
Yes.
that, and they're responsible for do that. So the name inclusionable is very, very beautiful.
Thank
I want
you.
to bring you to the research. So how did you find out about the three pillar,
Oh, yes.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's
that leading to inclusion.
well, I'm laughing because it was a framework that
Mm.
we were assigned to use in our doctoral program. So when you're at the stage of beginning to write your dissertation, you get matched with a chairperson, a dissertation chair, and that person gives you guidance on how they want you to prepare your dissertation. So it turns out there is a framework for performance management, and it's called KMO,
Ah,
knowledge, motivation, and organizational resource or
support.
support.
Ah,
And the authors are Clark and Estes. The two last names are Clark and Estes. And I loved it because it made such sense to me. And I even use it nowadays when I'm consulting with a team or a leader. I don't tell them I'm doing a framework because sometimes people get frightened by frameworks because they think it sounds academic. So I just
mm,
talk about, is this a knowledge problem? Is it a motivation problem? Or is it an organizational resources problem or a combination? So
mm.
it's a wonderful framework that
Wow.
I learned in my program and I've used since then. And by the way, you can also use it as a planning tool.
Mm.
So if we're planning a change, what do we have to make sure people know?
Ah,
And there's different levels of knowledge. There's 4 levels, but we don't have to go into that. But then there's motivation. What kinds of intrinsic or extrinsic motivation are important here? Because there's many kinds of motivation. And then what kinds of organizational support is required? And it was really a beautiful exercise for me of scaffolding on top of all of that. With I had to write the research questions. I had to then put them into. I did what's called a mixed methods survey, a gap analysis. So I had a survey for quantitative. I had interviews for qualitative, but it was same kinds of questions. So in a qualitative interview, you can go deep and you can go really rich conversation, whereas in the survey, it's more, you get a lot of information, but you can't go any deeper.
Uh, and then, how long does it take you? Did it take you to write and publish the book?
Yeah, well, we get started in it pretty quick. I think it was a 2-year process overall because we built on having to do, survey methods and learn about that. And we had to we had to write 5 chapters in our particular dissertation. One chapter was, well, what's the problem you're trying to solve? And you had to word it a certain way. And the second chapter is all the literature you can find about the problem to show that you've studied the problem. And the third chapter is your methodology. The fourth chapter is your findings, like what did you find? And the fifth chapter is your recommendation for, a solution to the particular problem. It's not always done the same. Like dissertation, doctoral programs are all different, but this was what ours was. And it was called a gap analysis because I was trying to understand. I didn't know the source of the problem. And so that's a different approach. I was doing it's called a gap analysis. Very fascinating.
So if a leader is reading and applying the mindset, what we call inclusionable mindset, put it that way, So how would that leader change or become?
How would they change?
Yes.
I think, they have to start with knowing themselves. So a very big chunk of my book is you cannot lead other people until you can lead yourself. So that chapter is about understanding yourself, self-awareness as a precursor to having empathy and things like that. So how they might change is maybe they hadn't spent a lot of time doing this, a lot of self-reflection. So, or if they had been doing it, maybe they hadn't thought about it as being a leader, or maybe they could go deeper. And then the second thing they would change is how do they know their team? So do you really know the individuals on your team? And do you know that what motivates one person would not work with another person? Or do you treat everyone the same?
Wow.
And so they would change their approach. I'll tell you a quick story.
Please.
If I may. I love stories.
Yeah.
So this is a perfect example. I was interviewing, these were volunteers. So these leaders were being interviewed one-on-one. And I had this person that I was on the call with, Zoom. And I'm supposed to say things like, can I have your permission to record the call? And then I'm going to send you the transcript. And if there's anything you don't want in the transcript, I'll take it out. And he said, oh, I don't care what you do with my information. And I thought, oh, that's kind of abrupt. And so I thought, oh, I wonder if he's like really going to give me a lot of good information about inclusion, because he didn't seem very personable. So I started asking him questions, and he started, he'd give me these rapid fire answers, and I was beginning to be biased towards him, like, oh boy, what a waste of time this is going to be. And then I asked him that question that I mentioned earlier. When was the time you realized that you needed to change your approach to be about inclusion? And this is what completely blew my mind. Changed. He said, well, I got some feedback on a survey that some of my team said I didn't recognize them enough. He said, at first I was really annoyed and hurt, like, oh, of course, sure I do. Of course I do. He said, but then I thought, okay, I should take this seriously. And what am I going to do? He said, okay, I decided I would put a goal for myself that every week I would find 2 instances where I could recognize a team member. He said, at first I thought it was going to be really hard. I'm going to have to make things up. This is really stupid. And then he said, you know what? When I did it like that and had it in my calendar, it wasn't hard at all.
Mm.
He said, I just had to make the time and the commitment to do it. And that it wasn't hard at all. And this person changed completely in my mind from being this kind of resistant, gruff, probably not very helpful interviewee to being my hero. Because he's exactly the kind of person I believe is out there in the millions, tens of millions of people who are in roles where they're able. He didn't have to do anything special. He didn't have to take a course. He didn't have to read a book. He didn't have to go to coaching. He just had to make it as important in his daily or weekly calendar as every other thing he had on his plate.
Mm.
And he chose to do that.
Wow.
And it's actually a motivational, I would call it utility value. It's an extrinsic kind of motivation. If I do this, I'll get that. So he did it because he saw it was useful to do it. But what he then realized how important it was to do, which is an intrinsic motivation. So he's my hope that at any moment, any leader could switch into that kind of a change.
Yeah.
Then there's the other thing, the other chapter I have after that is knowing your organization. So you got to know what system you're working within so that you can understand what could you take advantage of, what do you have to be aware of, how do you operate in that system and how you might have to change. Maybe you never used to ask for help before. What if you could find a colleague who is thinking like you were and you could partner up, maybe make some different choices about how you're leading. Things like that. So that's what I tried to make my book about things you could do by taking these steps and then know the business problem. What problem are you trying to solve? That's half the battle. I learned that early on in my org design course. What problem are you trying to solve? And is it a lens that you have, as in going back to is it a knowledge issue? Is it an organizational issue? Is it motivation? And that helps you with how do you solve that problem with your own behavior.
You look at all the leaders are smart people, ingenious people, right? Because they have to battle every day with the market change, with a lot of things in life. But if they have the intention, like the leader that you mentioned in there, if they see the importance, they see the intention, they will be able to use their brain, their commitment to make it happen. If that is becoming something, that one goal that they want to fix, right? And when you share that, I feel like a lot more, because each of us are a leader ourselves. We have a family to lead, we have a team to lead, we have ourselves to lead. If we could be that, like inclusionable leader for ourselves, to listen to us, to the voice inside of us, the people around us, from every day, imagine how we could become in the future. And thank you for making that inclusionable.com website becoming a venue for a lot of people to share their ideas, how they practice, and we learn through the feedbacks, the insight sharing from one to another. Right. That's beautiful.
I'm hoping to have a second book. But in order to do that, I need stories. So I'd like my second book to be inclusionable in action. So action, the action part, and I want it to feature stories of people from around the world who have stories to share about inclusion and what they've experienced or what they've done in a way that people can learn from. But in order to do that, I need people to submit stories. So on my website, there's a community section, and one of the tabs is inclusion action, and the other one is inclusion insights. That's where I'm hoping to generate discussions where people can come and talk. I want it to be like a community center. When you go into a community center, there's different rooms, there's different activities you can participate in. You can stay as long as you want. You can come and go, but like a gathering place.
Wow. I will definitely spend today to explore that in inclusionable.com. Okay. Christine, my wife and I, we always love to help people to improve their ability to think. because we believe there's so many noises out today that affecting our ability to think, and we would love to bring back that strength for the people who listen to our show, by asking the experts who join in to share their practice of thinking. And so they don't have to reinvent in the wheel. They can maybe just listen to tips here, tips there, and see what is works for them. So the question I would love to ask you is, Christine, how have you been growing your ability to think over the years?
Hmm, that's a great question. I know for sure I've been pushing myself to be in situations with people that are different than me, but like try a new interest group, or experience something that I might not normally be that interested in. And I'm going to go back to my doctoral program just for a moment because that's another example. We had a class on diversity,
Hmm.
and that totally changed my life, this one class, because I realized I had such a very narrow framework of the world, and I'm a person of privilege. I'm a white middle-aged woman, and I got to see the lived experience and hear the lived experience of classmates who are many whom were people of color. And I realized I had got to be aware of my own limitations, my own biases, and continue to push the envelope. So doing things that I normally wouldn't find necessarily, oh, why would I do that? But now trying more and more of those kinds of things. And that example of that diversity class is the most powerful example I can give you. And even a silly little example. I love fiction,
Hmm.
novels. And I was in a book club not that long ago where the person who got to choose the book chose a short story anthology. And I was like, oh, I hate short stories. They're so short. And I'm not going to like this. But I realized, no, you got to do what the other people are saying. So I read the short story anthology. It was great. It's
Hmm.
wonderful. So I just have to keep reminding myself of what a limited view of the world I have if I only stick with what I know.
Wow.
And that, again, it does help me because I do like to try, I do like to be curious, but now I've realized I can't just be curious in a very selective fashion as long as it fits in my little box. I got to be curious about other things. That's why Vietnam is so exciting.
You have
Yeah,
a new family, new friend here also. Okay.
I feel
And
like that.
Christine, throughout over 1,000, close to 1,300 conversation with experts around the world that we've been having over the past 4.5 years, in over 120 countries in all 7 continents that we had, we came up with one of the concept that we call newness intelligence that my wife and I are working on with a lot of academias at the moment, because it's very easy to see behind a successful and accomplished and fulfilling in the leader and experts is their ability to lean into newness then and exploring things. Like you say, you have a narrative view of the world, and even if you are curious, you want to be expanding into the new territories to expand your curiosity, right? The leader that you mentioned earlier into the conversation, he did a little test here and there, a little test here and there to recognize other people. That's the little newness, every two newness in the week that he did, beside other things that he's been doing also, that help him to see the importance of his work and inclusion that could impact on other people, right? And we believe that change would be a lot easier for each of us if we constantly experience new things in life, small little. So when change happens, then we're not, like shocked, but we are a little bit more open to it. So I want to hear your opinion about that, how you define newness and how you see the importance of newness in the picture of change for people.
I love that. I really love that what you're saying, and I especially I want to touch on the idea of small
Yeah.
change because I think that's another underused strategy for, for change and for success. I don't know about now, but for several years in the corporate world, there was this push around big, hairy, audacious goals, and they call it BHAGs. But the idea was it has to be big and it has to be like, scary, and it has to be huge in order to be worthwhile.
Mm.
And I always got nervous about those because it's fine to say that, but when it comes right down to starting to achieve a goal like that, it was really hard to find people that were willing to put the time and effort in, or to have the commitment for the long haul, or to have the resources. So all these reasons why, that's not going to work. But what I finally figured out, and I think this answered your question, for me, the newness and the success in exploring it is to try one sure thing.
Wow.
Like, what's one sure thing, and it can be a new thing that you could try. And that's, to me, a best practice. I don't even like the term best practice because it implies a certain standard that what if I don't meet it? Then that means I didn't learn anything. So for me, it's the newness is, almost anybody could commit to try one small thing, one sure thing that's something new. So if you can to me, if I can make it, would you try this one new thing? Because it's maybe sure thing. And it's like, yep, I can try that.
Wow. Christine, the letter N in the newness framework that we have is exactly like that, because we want people to be very proactive in seeking for new things instead of like passive, right? So the N is notice for one new thing every day. So we practice one little, maybe a little tree there is new. Yesterday is not there. Maybe you're wearing a new shirt that I'm seeing you today. Maybe it's just a new idea that we have to proactively seeking. So we're not in the passenger seat, but in the driver's seat. So thank you for sharing that. One last question for this conversation. Okay, sure. And I've been also asking this question to almost 1,000 experts joining, because I want to travel time with you, and I want to bring you to one moment in your life, and we're going to have a conversation with that Christine at that moment. And I'm thinking about the moment that your parents told you that, hey, you're not going to have your horse. Focus on.
That was a sad day.
Focus on something else. Focus on your curiosity of learning, of growing. Okay. And I bet that that night you got a lot of disappointments and a lot of questions. So now you and me gonna get into that room, sitting next to that little Christine, and you're gonna tell her anything about her future, any words of advice, any stories you're gonna tell that little Christine. So what is that you're gonna tell her about her future?
I would say to her, trust yourself and it will be okay. And the reason I tell you that is that I always noticed I had a very varied kind of a career path. It wasn't like, I'm going to be a doctor, or I'm going to be an accountant or a lawyer. And I always wondered, am I doing this right? Like, I'm going for what interests me. I'm going for possibilities. I'm trying something out. I don't know how it's going to work out. And I always had in the back of my mind, maybe I should be doing this different. But as it turns out, I'm exactly where I want to be. I love my work. I love my life. So I would tell my 8-year-old self, trust yourself. It's going to be okay. You will be okay.
Beautiful. Christine, we love you from Vietnam. We look forward to one day to seeing you, and thank you so much for having this beautiful conversation, for doing your work. Your work is important, especially with all of the changes that like crazily happening out there. Helping other people to to make friends with change, to get change becoming, like a part of their superpower is important. And your work is very honorable. So thank you so much for doing that. And I wish you all the best. And I really look forward to the day that we're going to meet you in person. If I travel to the US to see our children, I would love to go to Oregon
Please,
and have a cup of tea with you also.
please do let me know. I would love to host you, and I look
Okay.
forward to the day when we can meet in person. Ha,
Thank
it's been a
you.
pleasure. Thank you
It's
so
been a
much,
pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening.
and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye bye.